These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Plexiderm, real science, real results. More info at plexiderm.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. And Superbeats, heart chews for heart-healthy energy. More info at superbeatsradio.com/Tom.
Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the two murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War, the other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out, brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were charged.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak. It is Anything Goes Friday, although I've got a pile of news and a bunch of rants and many, many things to share with you today. So we'll just kind of do it, and we have one guest at the top of the second hour who's going to be talking about the oil and gas billionaires who, have been supporting the insurrection, which is pretty amazing. John Noël will be with us. And I want to get into in our third hour today, it'll be in our second hour, will AI robots destroy the human race? And in our third hour, we've got a Geeky Science that I think you'll find interesting, particularly if you want to keep healthy. So that's what's going on. I did want to just tell you about, how Anything Goes Friday is going to have to work today. Unfortunately, Joyce, our call screener, broke her wrist day before yesterday and was in the hospital yesterday. And so, it's COVID. I can't just bring in somebody from the outside to work with Sean. We've been kind of creating a little bubble here in the studio. And so I have no call screener. So I'm call screening myself, which means that you're not going to hear me answer the phone. And you'll simply be put on hold. And then when you go on the air, you're on the air with me. This is, it's kind of a throwback to how we started back when we first started this program, and it was just Louise and me. And, and actually my friend and colleague Ed Schultz did it this way for a year or so. So it's not a disaster. The problem is, or the situation, how it works is, and I'll just lay this out once and maybe I'll have to repeat it in the second or third hour, but we use a telephone screening system that automatically recognizes your caller ID. So as soon as you call in, it pops up your phone number. And if you've ever called before and Joyce has entered your name and city and state and or topic, although the topics don't get saved, that pops up too. So I can see right now that and so people who have called before, I can just push one single button here and immediately put them on hold. So right now I've got Drew in Portland on hold, and Mike in Lomita, California, and Russ in Hickory Hills, Illinois. But I also have a couple of calls, one from Illinois and one from Jacksonville, that have never called before, and I have no idea who these people are, so I can't put them on the air. I mean, so if the phone is ringing and ringing and ringing, it means one of two things. Either one, you've never called before, you're not in my database, and so I can't put you on the air today, or that I'm doing something else. Like we're in the middle of a break and I ran to the bathroom or something. So just hang in there. But if you've never called before, odds are you will not hear your phone be answered. If you have called before, what you'll hear is a click and a whoosh sound, which means that when you go on the air, which means that you're on the air. And otherwise, you'll hear this show in your ear as you're on. And so as I'm speaking, I see we're picking up. Our board is filling right up. So I will get to Anything Goes in Anything Goes Friday here and just our day in just a moment. But first, I wanted to share with you. There is a lot in the news. First, I wanted to share with you what anybody listening to talk radio who might be dialing across their radio dial and tuning into right-wing talk radio is going to be hearing today. Just so you know, right? Our friends over at The Writing, RIGHTING, THE, thewriting.com, every day monitor all these right-wing websites and publish a daily report. And I got mine this morning. And here's what's coming out of Newsmax. The Democratic reign of terror has begun. See, you thought these guys were like chastened, they were going to calm down. They 5 people dead, 6 people dead. Now you have a police officer committed suicide. Maybe we should back off. Maybe we should chill out. No, that's not happening. All right, there were 10 Republicans for whom that happened in the House of Representatives, and that's it. 197 said, hey, insurrection, treason, we're down with that as long as we can perpetuate the voter fraud lie. Which is the op-ed that I published over at thomhartmann.medium.com today, is, the reason why Republicans can't back away from this is because for the last 40 years, much of the reason that Republicans are in political office, particularly at the federal level right now, is because of voter suppression. And the voter suppression that's been done has been done because they've been claiming that there's voter fraud. And there isn't. The George W. Bush spent 2.5 years and $74 million in all 100 federal prosecutors looking for voter fraud. He found 82 cases. The most comprehensive study was done from 2000 to 2014. During that period of time by, as I recall, it was Loyola University. There's a link to it in the article that I published today over at thomhartmann.medium.com. And they found 31 cases nationwide out of 1 billion votes. And almost all of these, by the way, when they do find so-called voter fraud, almost always, 90% of the time, it's somebody who got out of jail for a felony conviction and registered to vote and voted, thinking that they could vote, not knowing that they live in one of the dozen or so states that say if you've ever been convicted of a felony, you can never again vote, which goes back to Jim Crow. I mean, that was one of the instruments to disenfranchise black people. Criminalize everything like loitering and stuff like that, and then make the law that if you've ever been convicted of a crime, you can't vote. So that's going on. So anyhow, back to what the right-wingers are saying today. This is in The Writing. The Democratic reign of terror has begun. It is endangering our free speech, our free press, our political playing field, and personal liberty. Watch your back. The Democrats are using outrageous and unsupportable. The Democrats are using the outrageous and unsupportable Capitol riot. So let's just distance ourselves from the riot, right? The same way that the Reichstag fire in 1933 was used as a pretext for an authoritarian crackdown. Yeah, the FBI going after right-wingers who are conspiring to kidnap and kill American politicians is a reign of terror, an authoritarian crackdown. This from American Greatness. Democrats cling desperately to Trump hatred. The Democrats are not going to be able to hide much longer behind their Trump hatred, but it's really all they've got. Yeah, right. Front page. The Capitol Hill riot, was Pelosi's fault, not Trump's. The Capitol riot is Pelosi's disaster, and she's making the most of it by blaming it on everyone else. Her private police force had the resources and the people to keep out the Visigoths, never mind a few hundred people, and instead turned out what should have been a riot into a disaster. Right. Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Quote, last week's deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol was not an act of racism, nor was it an insurrection. It was not an armed invasion by a brigade of dangerous white supremacists. Those are lies. What happened last week is being used to justify the most sweeping crackdown on civil liberties and free speech in the history of this country, says Tucker Carlson. The American Thinker published this piece. The headline, multiple leftists arrested for Capitol riot. Have you seen one, by the way? With arrest after arrest of assorted leftists emerging, it looks like impeachment-happy Nancy Pelosi has a lot of egg on her face. And it goes on from there. But that's where they're at. And you know, the essential bottom line here is this is why we have been this is the result of coddling right-wing terrorists for 30 years. And, Josh Marshall wrote a great piece on the 15th today over at talkingpointsmemo.com, and he just lays this out. Remember when Obama first came into office? A year earlier, the FBI had released a report about the threat of left-wing terrorism. And then the first couple of months of the Obama administration, they issued their report about right-wing terrorism. And Rush Limbaugh and the whole right-wingosphere went insane. And so Obama pulled back the report. And the FBI in 2009 had warned of exactly what we're seeing right now. So anyway, I'll be picking up your phone calls right after the break. 202-808-9925. Stick around. It's Talk Media for the sane among us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Oh, and I'll get into this after the break, but it looks like foreign sources were paying the leaders of this riot. And welcome back. Drew in Portland. Hey, Drew, you're on the air. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you very much for taking my call. If Fox News makes people dumber, you're definitely propelling people to be smarter. Things I learned from you 2 to 3 days ahead of the news.
What's up?
I wanted to ask about your opinion of the TYT team, the Young Turks, and all that they're doing. I am a big supporter of Democracy Now! And Free Speech TV. I've been giving to them since the Obama years every single month, and I always try to donate when you guys have pledge drives. But TYT is on the cutting edge of the future of what the progressive voice is. The same way that, like, you're doing what is great with radio, they're on the cutting edge of podcasts. Do you ever see there being some place where TYT and Free Speech TV can come together so it can be a singular voice that can compete against Fox Network?
Yeah, that would be something, a question to put to Cenk Uygur, who started and runs the Young Turks, and the management over at Free Speech TV. I would love to see some sort of an alliance, but I think that basically they both created their own little empires and ecosystems. Cenk has done a great job. He's a friend. I've known him for years. And the Young Turks, do a great job. There's some great programming here on Free Speech TV as well. So I can't say anything other than good things about both of them. And I'm not the person to try to make what you're talking about happen. I think having multiple and TYT principally squats on or lives on YouTube, and Free Speech TV is principally on satellite television. So whether the twain shall meet someday. I just don't know, Drew. But thanks a lot for the call. Mike in Lomita, California. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to observe that under Trump, the terrorists have won, There are public health officials all across the country. They're living under fear for their own lives and those of their families because of the Cunitic fringe, which actually, believes Trump and what he says, and even more fantastical things than what Trump says on the record. And we hear about these big corporations pulling back funding from Trump, and we're supposed to treat them as some great heroes. Well, I think they bankrolled and supported Trump the same way the industrialists did in Germany for Hitler. And I don't think they deserve any particular medal for finally taking away their support after they've got the tax cuts and the elimination of pollution regulations that they bought with their support for him.
Agreed, Mike. And by the way, these are the same industrialists. I mean, not literally the same people, but basically, this is a replay of 1933, or 32, Amen. Maybe it was. No, yeah, it was 33, I think. The Smedley Butler plot. Where industrialists, wealthy American Republican industrialists, approached Smedley Butler. They had already lined up 100,000 men with this right-wing veterans group, and that had affiliations with the Ku Klux Klan. And they tried to enlist Smedley Butler to overthrow Franklin Roosevelt, to seize him, arrest him, execute him, whatever. I mean, that never was made clear. But there was going to be a coup. They were going to stage a coup. And, here it is again. Mike, thank you. Thanks. You pointed it out very well. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Just a couple of other news stories I want to share with you, and then we'll get back to your calls. Stick around. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast, 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. There's so much news coming out of the Trump administration, so much corruption, so many crimes. Now they're letting people kill endangered species. Now they're selling off, the Arctic National Wildlife Preserve refuge to big oil companies. Now they're they're authorizing pesticides that we know cause birth defects and damage to children. It's just step after step after step that it's so easy to forget that back in July of 2020 it was reported that Jared Kushner and Mike Pence's nephew John Pence created a couple of LLCs, American-Made Media Consultants Corporation, that took $617 million of Trump campaign cash, and nobody knows where it went. I'm telling you, these guys are professional grifters. We need to keep an eye on it. There's a whole rant about it over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Okay, some distressing news. I just want to wrap this up and this rant, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. This Yahoo News has this exclusive story that was republished over at Daily Kos this morning by middle-of-the-road Dem. And I'll just share a little bit of it. Right-wing figures and websites, including VDare, the Daily Stormer, which is the Nazi website, and Nick Fuentes received generous donations from a Bitcoin account linked to a French cryptocurrency exchange. This Chain Analysis is this company that can track the movement of Bitcoin, and they investigated the donations after Yahoo News shared the data points about the transaction. There is apparently either a foreign government or a very wealthy foreign individual who has been pouring money into right-wing treasonous groups in the United States. Now, what country would gain advantage if the United States were to descend into civil war? I can think of a long list, right? China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, any country basically around the world. There's a whole bunch of them. North Korea, those are the ones who are probably most active in the political sphere. But any one of those countries benefits if American democracy goes down the tubes. If American democracy is quote shown to be a farce or something like that, if because we're the example for the world of how democracy works. We've been doing this for 244 years. And if we fall, then the other democracies around the world will probably not last much longer. Or the center of gravity for democracy and the praise and upholding of democracy will shift away from the United States and over to, for example, Europe. And people will start saying, you know who we want to be like? We want to be like Norway. Or Germany, actually, is probably more likely, rather than the United States. And isn't that bizarre after we fought World War both wars, actually, against Germany. But in any case, and I got nothing against Germany. I lived there for a year. I have good friends there. It's a great country. Anyhow, and then this thing, the GOP freakout, I hit the brake in the first segment as I was telling you about this, how the Obama administration, the FBI in 2009 said, we've got a problem. The Department of Homeland Security issued this intelligence report about the threat of right-wing extremism. It was the second. It was one of two. They did one on left-wing extremism and foreign terrorism, and one on right-wing extremism. And they said that there was a real threat here. But there was such a scream, such an outcry from elected Republicans, and particularly Fox News and right-wing hate radio, that Janet Napolitano, who at the time was the director of, the Secretary of Homeland Security, caved in, rescinded the report. The Daryl Johnson, who was one of the guys who worked on this report for the DHS, he said work related to violent right-wing extremism was halted as a result of this, right? Because Rush Limbaugh was screaming about it, and Republicans in Congress were saying, how dare you issue a report making it look like Republicans are affiliated with terrorists. So this is the guy who was inside the Department of Homeland Security who helped write the report. Daryl Johnson, he wrote, work related to violent right-wing extremism was halted. This is 2009, under President Obama, was halted. Law enforcement training also stopped. That would be with regard to right-wing extremism and its threat. My unit was disbanded. His unit was the group that was tracking white extremist, white nationalist, white supremacist, violent groups in the United States. They were disbanded in 2009. He goes on to say, and one by one, my team of analysts left for other employment. By 2010, there were no intelligence analysts at DHS working domestic terrorism threats. And if you think that Donald Trump put any in place, think again. So, surprise, surprise. There's a right-wing uprising in the United States, and the federal government doesn't know about it. This, by the way, isn't the first time this happened. As Josh Marshall's pointing out over at TalkingPointsMemo.com, he says back in April 1995 with the bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building, he writes, Republicans who had just taken control of Congress in January of that year quickly shifted gears to defending militias, calling these militias conservatives being smeared by the association with McVeigh. In June of 1995, Josh Marshall writes, the Senate held a hearing aimed at humanizing members of the militia movement with little more than very motivated conservative activists, as Ken Adams of one Michigan militia group told senators at the hearing, quote, what's the militia? We're doctors, lawyers, people getting involved in their government. And thus, here we are. How are we not surprised by this? Where do we go from here on this? And now Franklin Graham has come out and has weighed in, Billy Graham's son, and said that the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump were just like Judas Iscariot.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Franklin Graham suggesting that Donald Trump is Jesus Christ and 10 Republicans who voted to impeach him are Judas. It doesn't get weirder than that. Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Alan J. Lichtman, and it's titled Repeal the Second Amendment, The Case for a Safer America. This is from the introduction, titled The Book That Must Be Written. On April 28, 1996, 28-year-old Martin Bryant stopped at an inn near his home of Newtown in Tasmania, Australia, and shot to death its two owners. He then drove to the former penal colony and tourist attraction of Port Arthur, where he lunched at a cafe. After eating, Bryant pulled from his sports bag a semi-automatic rifle with a 30-round magazine that he had legally purchased through a newspaper ad. With no provocation, he began firing at patrons in the cafe and its gift shop. Before the police stopped his shooting spree, Bryant had murdered 35 and wounded 18 others. His motive remains unknown. There were people everywhere, bodies, said witness Lynn Beavis. I thought at the time, being a nurse, I've seen dead people, I've seen blood, I've seen things like this, but what I saw in there, nobody but perhaps a soldier would know what that was like. The leadership of a shocked nation responded to the Port Arthur massacre, not with thoughts and prayers, but with decisive action. The country's conservative-led government rebuffed their gun lobby and its American ally, the NRA, to adopt comprehensive national gun controls. In a 2015 broadside labeled Australia, There Will Be Blood, the NRA charged that those regulations, which Australia significantly tightened as of 2002, have, quote, robbed Australians of their right to self-defense and empowered criminals. If the NRA was right, America, with its lax control over firearms for alleged self-defense, should be one of the world's safest countries, certainly far safer than Australia, where criminals presumably evade gun controls to prey on defenseless, law-abiding citizens. Yet in the latest reporting year, gun homicides claimed 14,542 American lives, compared to 27 in Australia. And all homicides took 19,510 American lives, compared to 222 in Australia. Since the NRA issued its warning, firearm homicides have declined in Australia, while soaring by 3,534 in the U.S. An American is now over 30 times more likely per capita than an Australian to be murdered by a gun, and 7 times more likely to be murdered by any means. If we had rates comparable today to Australia's, some 14,000 American lives would have been saved from firearm homicides in 2017 alone. By the gun lobby's twisted logic, Japan, which has one of the world's strictest gun control laws, should be drenched in innocent blood. Yet out of a population of 127 million, shooters in Japan murdered only 3 persons and injured only 5 in firearm assaults throughout 2017. Australia and Japan are not outliers. As compared to residents of our closest peer democracies in the G7 group of nations plus Australia, an American in 2017 was over 20 times more likely to die from a gun homicide. The gun lobby would have you forget that gun deaths are not limited to murders. In 2017, 23,854 Americans died from gun suicides, 64% more than were killed in firearm homicides. As compared to the peer nations, the 2017 per capita rate of firearm suicides in the United States was 7 times higher, while the rate of suicides by other means was 40% lower. These other democracies all have strict firearm regulations. None has a constitutional right to keep or bear arms, a distinction the United States shares worldwide only with Guatemala, whose gun murder rate is the 3rd highest of some 195 nations worldwide. Why has America lagged behind the democratic world in protecting its citizens from needless death and injury? The culprit is not spending by the NRA on campaigns and lobbying, which other pressure groups exceeded. The real problem is that which gun control advocates fear to name, the Second Amendment. Led by the NRA, the gun lobby exploits a historically defective, perverse reinvention of this amendment to inspire their grassroots supporters, sell guns, and provide constitutional cover for their opposition to making us safer by regulating firearms. The competing movement for gun control has floundered in response to the gun lobby's triumphant marketing of the Second Amendment. Gun control advocates have righteous zeal and noble motives, but lack a winning strategy. Instead of forthrightly refuting the lobby's bogus claims, the gun control movement has instead fallen into the trap of lamely insisting, we support the Second Amendment, but we also support responsible gun control. With such a self-defeating strategy, the movement can never win. It plays on the gun lobby's home turf and fails to rally the American majority that favors stricter firearms regulations. It provokes only scorn from a gun lobby that dismisses yes but assurances as rank hypocrisy. And it ignores the clear history and the true meaning of the Second Amendment itself. The movement for gun control must strike hard with a new strategy. Repeal of the Second Amendment is not only right, but realistic. It would break open the political logjam and open a path for the comprehensive national gun control and safety measures that have eluded the American people for so long. None of these measures would confiscate firearms or stop Americans from using guns for hunting, sport shooting, antique collecting, or legitimate self-defense. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These form the Second Amendment. Book Repeal the Second Amendment by Alan J. Lichtman. On the Science Revolution this week, we have Dr. Justin Frank, MD. He's here on the psychology of authoritarianism. We'll be taking a deep dive into the mind of authoritarianism, where and how the authoritarian mind begins. And Dr. Frank ties the mind of the authoritarian followers to Donald Trump and the whole mess there. Plus, the vaccine effort has failed. Can it be fixed? Or should we just do the one-shot approach? Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are found. By the way, yesterday, federal prosecutors for the first time filed a charge against one of the people who was at the Capitol riot, saying that, quote, strong evidence, including Chansley's own words and actions at the Capitol, supports the intent of the Capitol rioters was to capture and assassinate elected officials of the United States government. He's charged with active participation in an insurrection attempt to violently overthrow the United States government. That's mind-boggling. That's just mind-boggling. Anyhow, picking up your phone calls here. Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I just wanted to talk about what Biden should do when he talks about making it bigger, building it better, and everything. Anyway, is like feed and clothe the people and house the people, educate the people, and provide health care, you know, like you said, coming from the bottom up. I mean, like the very people that are under these viaducts and in the parks, fixing up these abandoned apartment buildings and putting people in them, and actually clothing people like they do with the people that ring the bell during the Christmas thing, where they get those.
The Salvation Army. Yeah,
Salvation Army, and then actually house the people in these, fix up these abandoned buildings, and actually house the people in them, and then you can start to educate the people and provide health care for the people. All this has to be done in order to change what has happened here in America.
Yeah. You know, most of the developed world, Maine, most other countries don't have the homelessness problem we have.
Right.
They don't have a lot of the problems we have because they have a strong social safety net, as you're describing. And if we were to, go back to the New Deal or the Great Society, I mean, if we just brought back Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, at least half of those programs have been gutted or minimalized or made really, really hard to gain access to. If we were to just do that, it would be a big step forward. But, we've had 40 years of Republicans consistently gutting anything that goes to individuals and people while cutting taxes on billionaires and corporations and subsidizing people like the oil industry to the tune of $600 billion a year. Say what? Right.
Well, that's that trickle down.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, although there's a lot of it trickling up to the giant corporations. I mean, our subsidies for industry are just mind-boggling. And now, you know, Bernie just came out with a report, the Government Accountability Office, which is the GAO, right, which does analysis for members of Congress, among other things. He said, would you please look into how much the Veterans Administration is paying for prescription drugs versus how much Medicare pays for prescription drugs. So it's kind of an apples to apples comparison, right? You've got two federal agencies that are both buying literally hundreds of billions of dollars worth of drugs every year. And so what are they paying? And of course, you know, Maine, there's this law in place that George W. Bush signed in 2005 that says that Medicare can't negotiate drug prices. They have to pay full retail.
Yeah,
and so what the GAO came up with is that the Veterans Administration is paying half, actually 54%, more than half, less than half as much for the same drugs as Medicare pays, which means that the tens of billions of dollars every year in profit that the pharmaceutical industry is making off the United States, a good chunk of that's coming out of Medicare. And of course, because if they can get away with that with Medicare, they're getting away with that, with you and me, or people who are not on Medicare. Actually, I am. But I mean, it's just nuts. Anyhow, Maine, thanks a lot for the call. It's always great to hear from you. And thanks for listening to WCPT. Johnny in Galveston, Texas. Hey, Johnny, what's on your mind today?
Hey, long time no hear. I wish you and your family and your crew the best of health and happiness in the coming year, and I pray for all of us.
Thank you, Johnny. Back at you.
Listen, these past 9 days have been one hell of an emotional roller coaster ride, and that's to say nothing about the past 4 years. But I've noticed that not anywhere in independent media, so I'm guessing it hasn't been in corporate media either, any observation made about what happened the day of that horrific series of events in Washington, D.C., that inexcusable, unforgivable assault on our nation's capital, and what Trump and his family did right after that. They secreted themselves away under a white tent in a festive atmosphere, having drinks and watching a large monitor with multi-screens, and it was like watching them watch election night returns, except they didn't have any campaign volunteers with them because their volunteers, who they don't like, were out busy risking their lives to deliver them another illegal win in the White House. I was totally disgusted.
And they actually thought they were looking at the end of an election because they really thought these guys were going to go in there and kidnap and kill Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi, which throws the whole thing to Chuck Grassley as the president pro tem of the Senate. And that he would then say, okay, we're going to throw out the votes, the Electoral College votes from the 5 states that are in dispute, and we're going to throw the whole thing under the 12th Amendment into the House, or not the 12th Amendment. Whichever it is. Anyway, we're going to throw it all into the House of Representatives and let the House sort it out. And of course, in the House of Representatives, there's more. Each state has one vote, and there's more states that are Republican controlled than Democratic controlled, and that would have handed the 4 more years of the presidency to Donald Trump. I think he fully expected it to play out that way. Yeah, and I think he thought that the military would fall in behind him, and I suspect he's one of the most shocked people in America.
Here's one last thing. When you looked at Trump's daughter-in-law, she was in that fur coat and dancing the way she did, smiling, and they were all festive while those people were fighting and killing other people and breaking furniture and stuff. I thought that was totally repulsive, and it's just another proof of many that Donald Trump just refuses to do the hard work of politicking and going door to door and canvassing. He'd just rather steal and cheat, just like he's done his whole entire life, and that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, I'm with you, Johnny. Thanks a lot for the call. Russ in Hickory Hills, Illinois. Hey, Russ, what's on your mind today?
Yes, thanks for taking my call, Tom. I was listening to Steve Kornacki one day, and the guy who does our Saturday show, they gave out some numbers. I thought maybe you would be stunned. Trump has added $8.3 trillion to the debt. And then on last Saturday, our guy here that does our progressive show said, under this pandemic, the billionaires and millionaires made almost $500 billion to $1 trillion more in wealth. So I was glad to hear that.
No, it's a full trillion, actually.
Said that. Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's a full trillion. And here's what's insane, Russ. Let me just insert this, and you can riff on it. when Donald Trump said we're going to give a $1.5 trillion tax break to billionaires and big corporations, nobody said anything. I mean, I was yelling about it, but basically, the media was like, well, yeah, it's another Republican tax cut, like the fifth or, in the last 15 years. But the Republican Party, how is this going to affect our budget? It's all borrowed money. We're going to take borrowed money and we're going to give it to billionaires. Okay, that's fine with us. But now Joe Biden comes forward and he says, I've got $1.9 billion. Keep in mind, this is only $0.4 billion more than Trump's tax cut. And Trump's tax cut actually, in retrospect, it turns out cost us over $2 trillion. So Biden comes forward and he says, I want to just spend $1.9 billion. And with that money, that $1.9 million, I want to build this country back. His program has a $1,400 check for everybody, which brings us all up to $2,000. It has $400 a week for unemployment insurance. It's got $170 billion for schools to open, $130 billion it's $170 to subsidize schools, $130 billion specifically for them to reopen. There's a minimum wage rise to $15 an hour, ending the sub-minimum wage. $440 billion to help to towns and counties. Billions in grants and loan programs for small businesses, $350 billion in emergency funding for state, local, and territorial governments, $160 billion in funding for the vaccination program, $50 billion and going toward testing, $40 billion for PPE, new family leave provisions. Parents will get financial help, expanded tax credit up to $4,000 a child for families that make less than $400,000 a year. I mean, all this stuff for about the same price as Donald Trump's tax cut, 2017 tax cut. And what are the Republicans saying? We can't do this. It'll blow up the budget. To you, Russ.
Yeah, but I was glad to hear Bernie Sanders. I don't know if you caught him Sunday. He was on Jonathan Capehart. It says, we're raising taxes. We don't care. Biden's behind this. We're going to explode the deficit just like them. And they can't stop it because 50 votes. May I ask one other thing? How rich is Zorro? You think this guy was the Walmart? They had the money of the Walmart. How rich is Zorro? Because all I ever hear how rich.
You're talking about George Soros?
Yeah, how rich is this guy?
He's not that rich. He's a garden variety billionaire. He's not an ultra billionaire like Charles Koch or Jeff Bezos or any of those guys. Russ, I got to run, but thanks for the call and thanks for giving me a platform to go off on a pretty good rant. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a minute. It's Anything Goes Friday. And welcome back, Jerry in San Francisco, listening on the Thom Hartmann app. Hey, Jerry, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I've been thinking about QAnon lately for some funny reason, and I don't think I heard of QAnon about a year and a half ago. And now we got people elected in Congress. We have, many people even quoting what QAnon says. And it brought me back to thinking of a book I read maybe 6 years ago before Trump was even running for president. And it was about Putin's lies spoken to the Russian people over the last many years. And he went from that kind of hard-line propaganda stuff to a much more softer thing. And one of the people who was a broadcaster at that time wrote a book called Nothing is True and Everything is Possible. And you could just trade Putin's name in that book for Trump's. And it really applies to the people who sincerely believe, reading QAnon and so forth, and getting on the websites that carry that stuff.
Trump is just running a playbook, Jerry. This is when right-wing dictators come to power as a result of elections, as a result of populist upheavals, or as a result of coups. And I talked yesterday about the so-called soft coups that have happened in almost a dozen countries around the world just in the last 50 years. They all basically follow this playbook. You get a bunch of hardcore true believers, who are willing to use violence. When this was happening in El Salvador, we called them right-wing death squads. Remember? And these are the same people, right? It's right-wing paramilitaries, and in fact, we called them right-wing death squads in Honduras and Colombia and El Salvador and Guatemala as well. I
was going to say, I'm really glad you're making these points right now, because I was thinking maybe you could at one point bring three great minds together: Thom Hartmann, Dr. Frank, and then Dr. Wolf. Wolf taking the economic approach to QAnon, Frank the psychological, and you the political, social. Because I really love the frameworks that Wolf individually made yesterday about why people would risk their lives, being so angry to go into that situation. They didn't know if they're going to get blown away or not, but to be that angry. And he said, and he really humanized it, I thought, very well, about the economic conditions that people face over a period of time, and how you talked about that the hope is gone when Reagan said, hey, government cannot solve your problems. You're out there on your own, buddy. And we're reaping.
Yeah, and it's not so much at the level of the individual, and that's the thing that is completely missed, where people are saying, an economic analysis of social crises is wrong. It's not, there were a lot of people in that riot who were doctors and lawyers, and I don't know about doctors, but lawyers and cops and people with good jobs. They were not personally experiencing economic distress. But economic distress damages an entire culture, an entire society, an entire nation. And that produces this kind of craziness. Jerry, thank you for the call and the suggestion. I appreciate it. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program in just a moment. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag you're it. So what makes Trump supporters Trump supporters? Good question, right? Well, Psychology Today did a deep dive into a whole bunch of literature on this and a number of studies, and concluded that there were 5 characteristics that crossed right across virtually all Trump supporters. I do a deep dive on these on our video over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program today. But here's essentially what it says. Number 1, they are authoritarians, by and large authoritarian followers. They want a strong father figure to make them feel safe. Number 2, social dominance orientation. They believe in a caste system and they think they should be in the top caste. Number 3, prejudice. They view people of other races poorly. Number 4, intergroup contact. Most of them have never experienced significant contact with people of another race or people, deeply different than them. And number 5, relative deprivation. They feel like they've been screwed. They're not sure why. And Trump tells them, oh, it's those brown people. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Matt in Chicago. Hey, Matt, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, just to touch on what the last caller was mentioning, and I think you brought it up too, in that there's a large percentage of people who aren't financially strapped. They're successful. They have graduate degrees who are still in this Trump denial camp. And I think the big issue at large is the misinformation that is just heavily spewed on Fox News, Parler, all of these outlets that continue to hammer lie after lie. So no matter what, your intelligence level may be, if you're fed lie after lie after lie, and that's all the information that you're getting, you're going to believe that no matter who you are. So I don't know. Yeah,
especially if they're coming from people you trust. When they come from news organizations that you're familiar with, like Fox News, and you trust the spokespeople, when you hear it from politicians that you trust, then it's hard not to believe.
Yeah. And I personally don't think that this unity is going to actually take place unless those people who were all on Trump's side realize that this was a free and fair election, and if enough Republicans come over across the aisle and vote to impeach and convict this man, because whether he's able to run or not, what he did is a stain on this country and is an impeachable offense. So don't hide behind process. Get this guy out of there.
Yeah, I'm with you. Obviously, I mean, it's become quite apparent that Mitch McConnell is going to do a Merrick Garland here. He's going to just not do anything. He's on vacation. He's having a good time. It's all good, which means that the actual conviction of Donald Trump is going to have to happen in the next Senate. And after Donald Trump is no longer president, it still needs to happen. It needs to be a vote for history. And also, the guy needs to be stripped of his ability to run for public office in the future, and of his pension, and of his Secret Service protection, and everything else. Let him pay his own damn way going forward. Matt, thank you. Thank you very much. Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, amen to you. And it looks like Pelosi is going to hold off. And I hope she does hold off giving the impeachment to the Senate until Schumer is actually the majority leader, and that's probably going to be in about 2 weeks, I think, because I don't.
And that's going to give them more time to gather evidence. By the way, I mean,
exactly.
I mean, every single day there's new stuff coming out about this actually was a conspiracy. They were intending to kill Mike Pence. If he didn't say I'm not going to open the envelopes, I'm going to throw it to the House, which he didn't do. As more and more of this comes out, I think it's going to be easier and easier for them to convict Trump.
Well, 3 police from the Metro, Washington Metro, were on TV this morning, I saw, and they were telling their story about how they came in about an hour or so after the riot started and came in as backup and what was going on. And speaking of police, I know I've mentioned a few times this Michael Gonzalez, who was the Pacific Grove policeman who had the 3% sticker that a black woman who lives in PG actually saw. He has been fired. It's official now. Somebody found out that he was making postings on Parler, very anti-black and all that. He is countersuing that. He's going to have a wrongful termination lawsuit. What I'm wondering is if part of the lawsuit's going to be that he's being discriminated against because I'm assuming he's Mexican-American. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But his last name is Gonzalez. That would be the irony of ironies, of course. But not
it would, but no matter how it plays out, he what's the old saying? I think it was Jefferson said it about slavery, but Hunter S. Thompson reinvented it about politics. It's like holding a wolf by the ears, I mean, this guy is, with his wrongful death lawsuit, is opening himself to discovery. It means that the lawyers can start saying, okay, well, show us all your social media accounts. You want to sue? Fine, let's lay our cards on the table. And when you go into discovery, I mean, all bets are off. And it's going to be real interesting.
Yeah, one last thing is another component of all this is apparently these people who've been very brazen and open about their plans on the internet and so on. They're going to the darkest sections of the internet, and now they're shutting up. You might just say they're going to try to keep their plans secret. Unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good luck
thank you, Tom.
with that. Yeah. Thank you, Dennis.
Right.
Appreciate the call. We just have a half a minute here until the end of the hour, so I'll just round it out. And we'll at the top of the next hour, by the way, we have a guest talking about the fossil fuel billionaires in the industry that's funded Donald Trump and where it's going from there. And then after that, we will be right back with Anything Goes Friday for the rest of the second and all of the third hour. And I'll just be taking your calls and we'll be talking. But this is a very difficult time. And yet there's extraordinary hope. I mean, Joe Biden, with just $1.9 trillion, just slightly more than Donald Trump's tax breaks for billionaires. With that amount of money, he's going to do some really, really good stuff in this country that's much needed. So I'm really looking forward to this new administration. And, it's only a short while away. Let's see, Drudge has got a clock. Well, it's 120 hours left, says the Drudge clock. I think it may be a little less than that. We'll see. Anyhow, back with your calls in just a moment. It's Anything Goes Friday on the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
With chaos in Washington, worsening climate disasters, more wars than we can count, and a wobbling economy here at home, the last thing...
Companies support the Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Plexiderm, real science, real results. More info at plexiderm.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. And Superbeats, heart chews for heart healthy energy. More info at superbeatsradio.com/Tom.
Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the 2 murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War. the other with the Italian army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by three men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascists salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence at Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. John Noël is on the line with us, a senior climate campaigner with Greenpeace USA. Greenpeace.org is the website. His Twitter handle, by the way, is Noel, Noel _Johnny, or Greenpeace USA. And John, welcome to the program. Millions. I see one politician here, Ted Cruz, getting over $3.5 million from the oil and gas industry. Tell me about how oil and gas corporations funded this attempted takedown of the United States government.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for having me, and happy Friday. Watching the Capitol attack go down, we know that this type of violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. Right? These politicians, the 147 insurrectionists and the 7 senators, require corporate funding to maintain power and influence. And immediately, we knew that the oil and gas industry likely had a role to play. Right? So our analysis was a quick scrape publicly available data that showed, yes, indeed, the oil and gas industry donated $5.4 million to the 7 senators, and Ted Cruz was one of the top recipients of oil and gas funding. And specifically, he has a long-running relationship with ExxonMobil. They have donated over $100,000 to him directly over his career. But that's no secret that the oil and gas industry is wrapped up in the extreme right wing, right? They have profited off of the ascendancy of the right wing. It's been a symbiotic relationship up to now. But now they're trying to distance themselves from the insurrectionists and kind of the violence that unfolded, that probably would not have unfolded if it were not for corporate America largely supporting these politicians, right? And we don't think there's anything that the oil and gas industry could do right now to actually distance themselves from these politicians who vote in lockstep with fossil fuel priorities every time, for the most part, especially if you look at Ted Cruz.
So David Sirota has been writing about how there's all, and Judd Legum as well, about how there's all these corporations who are coming out and issuing corporate press releases and whatnot saying, we've decided to suspend our political donations because the nation's in a crisis and stuff like that. But in fact, what's going on is in the background, that's with PACs, political action committees. But with super PACs that don't report where their donations come from, it appears that they're continuing to fund many of these people. What have your investigations found in that regard, or in other ways that this money is leaking out? And how long? And if it does look like they're actually withholding their contributions for a while, how long will it be before they're back to their old tricks of funding climate denialists in the United States Senate and the House of Representatives?
Well, it's not that big of a statement to pause donations to these candidates because we just got out of the election cycle, right? We're in a totally new political environment where there are people won't be investing in candidates for another 10 months or something, right? So it's really not that bold of a statement to say you're pausing donations because there's really no one to give to right now, right? So we need to, if these corporations are serious, we need to have them say, we will not donate to the 147 insurrectionists for the length of their career. The super PACs are a whole other issue. We believe that, just because we have no idea who is donating to those entities, it's really hard to track, but we do not predict that they will stop operating in the same ways they have before. Because the fact of the matter is, oil and gas and the extractive industry writ large is tied up with the success of Republicans, right? And that includes the extremist elements of the political party, right? Which is hard to separate out from, kind of the various, very serious people who are now trying to distance themselves. But the reality is the right wing and the extremist elements turns out to be a core part of the actual party, right?
Well, now there's two things that have kept the oil and gas industry and the billionaires that it has created wealthy over the last couple of decades in particular. One is the annual $600 billion subsidy that the federal government provides in a whole variety of ways to the oil and gas industry. The second is this group of climate denial organizations that have been funded for years and years and years by both the fossil fuel industry and some of the fossil fuel billionaires. And they have a vested interest in, number one, keeping that $600 billion a year in subsidies flowing to them. And I'm guessing that's where Ted Cruz and his Republican buddies come in. And number two, in keeping the climate denialism going, which again is where Ted Cruz and his Republican buddies come in. So, it seems to me that if they were to stop funding these people and just get out of politics altogether, that you'd get some rational politicians in there who would acknowledge that the United States is in a climate crisis right now with wildfires and floods and tornadoes and hurricanes and God only knows what else. Directos, that they would acknowledge that, and that would be the point at which we start doing carbon taxes and we stop, giving hundreds of billions of dollars a year in subsidies, to the fossil fuel industry. So what else can they do?
Right, and I think that's a great point. So the movement is really leaning into this idea that you're seeing in the news is we can have healing from this process, right, from what happened last week at the Capitol attack, but we can only have healing through accountability, right? And it's not just accountability for the white supremacist mob and the politicos that fueled that white supremacist mob, but it's also for the oil and gas companies that have funded these politicians, right? So the healing process through accountability is an opportunity for the Biden administration to come in day one and with executive orders get rid of a lot of those fossil fuel subsidies that you mentioned. And it also gives a mandate to Congress to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies to raise revenue, right? So we can spend that money and invest in our communities who are on the front line of the climate crisis. So it really is a moment to have accountability and specifically to go after these fossil fuel subsidies, which are a total joke if we're trying to address the crisis in 2021.
Yeah, it just blows my mind. Joe Biden is asking for $50 billion to help fund a program to vaccinate everybody in the United States and thus get the economy running again and save lives, by the way. $50 billion. The fossil fuel industry is getting $600 billion a year, and every year Republicans, oh yeah, put that in the budget, no problem. Yes, we're going to salute that, but $50 billion to vaccinate Americans. Oh my God, what about the budget deficit? We can't deal with this. We're going to have horrible inflation. You got to run the country like a family, you can't afford it. It's nuts. It's just nuts. Is it your sense, John Noel, with the senior climate campaigner with Greenpeace USA, is it your sense that Americans are waking the hell up to what's going on?
I mean, I work on Capitol Hill. I've walked those same halls. I know a lot of the Capitol Hill staff up there. And the political situation at the national level in this country is at an all-time level of dysfunction that, like, a lot of people have never seen before. It is really, really dysfunctional and, frankly, scary at this current moment. And I think you'd have to, like, not be watching or reading anything to not be waking up to, like, how this country is run and who are the forces.
Which means this is an opportunity for change, right?
Yeah, no, it is ripe for change. And specifically on oil and gas subsidies, a lot of candidates like to talk about getting rid of subsidies, but who's actually...
Yeah, I'm with you. John Noël, a senior climate campaigner with Greenpeace USA. Greenpeace.org is the website. Noël _Johnny is the Twitter handle, or Greenpeace at Greenpeace USA. John, thanks so much for dropping by. Good talking with you.
All right, Tom. See you next time.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Anything Goes Friday. I do have a special rant for you in about 15 minutes at the bottom of the hour. But other than that, we're just taking your calls all day. Stick around. And welcome back. Lou in Pueblo, Colorado. Hey, Lou, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, good morning. I have a method that uses private distribution of the vaccine that's all set up. But first, I'd like to compliment you on and thank you for a career of creating progressives. You know, you've really helped our movement by informing people, although I think maybe Donald Trump created more in the last week. But
yeah, I think so.
For distributing, I like your method better than his, by the way. For distributing virus vaccines, why don't we just simply have the post office do it? Copy what they did in India. We can train, just giving one muscular shot is very simple. We could train the postal workers in a week. And they know where every house is, every post office services those people. We've got a distribution system set up. They could use the money. They're a private company. Why could anyone vote against it?
Well, I think the problem with having postal employees do it is, number one, they're essential employees. We need the mail to go. Number two, this is a new vaccine. It does have some side effects. And so it's not like getting a flu shot. You know, when you go when Louise and I go to our local CVS, it's just down the road, and get our flu shot every year, it's like you walk in, you identify yourself, they roll up your arm, bang, and you walk back out again, and the whole process takes 5 minutes. But with this one, you've got to, whoever's giving the shot has to put that person into a database, has to schedule them for the follow-up shot, has to inform them of the importance of keeping that schedule for the follow-up shot, has to answer the inevitable questions that people have, because this is brand new and they don't know what it is. They don't know what the coronavirus is in many cases. They don't know how the shot's going to work. So it typically takes 20 to 30 minutes to give one shot. And that's why what Biden is proposing is, instead of using the Postal Service, is using the National Guard, using the military in the United States, or our militia, the official militia of the United States. And some states, I mean, Kate Brown here in Oregon is talking about mobilizing the National Guard to do that. God bless her. I mean, I think that's probably what it's going to take. It's going to be a major, massive effort. But he has committed, Joe Biden has committed to 100 million shots in the first 100 days of his administration. And we're up to around 700,000 shots now a day. So if we can, breach that $1 million or million shots a day threshold, I think it'll be great. By the way, just to put a fine point on this, Lou, when Alex Azar, the former, pharmaceutical CEO who tripled the price of insulin on us, and then, his reward for that was Trump made him head of Health and Human Services. When Alex Azar came out a couple of days ago and said, we're going to release the stockpile, we're not going to require people, we're not going to withhold the second shot and then administer it when it's time for the second shot. We're going to release all of them and get them out to as many people as possible. Everybody thought, oh, great, more shots will be available. There was no stockpile. Either he didn't know what he was talking about or he was lying through his teeth as a PR stunt. I mean, I retweeted this story just a couple of hours ago. It's just saying this, this is a friggin' crime. I mean, this is just nuts. So anyway, that's what's going on this end. Lou, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back and thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. We'll be back in just a minute. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Once again, if you are calling in and we have heard from you before, so you're in our database, I will be able to answer your call. I'll just put you on hold and then I'll put you on the air when the time comes. If I don't answer the line, it's because you're not in our database and we can't put you on the air. So we'll be back. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com for people who support our program. It's astonishing. Just think about this. This year alone, with this one source of revenue, according to Senator Bernie Sanders, quote, this year alone, we could fund tuition-free college for all, eliminate child hunger, ensure clean drinking water for every American household, build 500,000 affordable housing units, provide face masks for everybody, produce the protective gear and medical supplies our health workers need for the pandemic, and fully fund the U.S. Post Office. Now, what is this magical thing that we could do that would produce enough money to do all these things? Fund the Internal Revenue Service. Republicans have cut its funding so badly since 2010 that fully a third of their enforcement is no longer happening. And tax cheats have walked off, or they're basically refusing to pay over $260 billion in taxes this year. You can hear the whole thing over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Just a reminder, if you're trying to call in and you have call blocking, if our system can't read your caller ID, then it won't answer the phone. Because I'm being my own call screener today, which this is no problem. But and we're wishing Joyce a quick and healthy recovery. But anyhow, Anything Goes Friday, picking up your calls. David in Shelton, Washington. Hey, David. Thanks for listening to KMAS. What's up?
Thank you, Tom. It's an honor to talk to you again. I have some figures here and some documents to share with you, and then I'd like to ask you a question. All right. In November, I received a 1.3% cost of living increase from Social Security. As a result of that, my SNAP went down $5 a month, and the $40 a month for incidentals, for such as toiletries and stuff, went down $1.75. So with a 1.3% increase, I lost $6.75. And I would like to know, and I have never received any stimulus. Is there any way that I can find out if I'm eligible? I mean, I'm a disabled yet, I'm a veteran.
Yeah, David, what you need to do you know who your member of the U.S. House of Representatives is?
Patty Murray?
No, she's your senator. A lot of people don't know who their representative is. No shame there. But what I would suggest you do is, and an easy way to find out, it would be to call the Capitol switchboard, 202-224-3121, and just say, you know, my name is David, and I live here, and here's my zip code, and who represents me in the U.S. House of Representatives. They will tell you, and they will connect you with that person's office. Then you ask for, when you get connected to that person's office, say that you want to talk to somebody in constituent services. Now they may use a different name for it depending, but typically they have a couple of people whose job is what's called constituent services. And what they do is they actually help you deal with the federal government. And you do have the senator's offices, Patty Murray and who's your other senator there in Washington State? In any case, yeah, Maria Cantwell, that's right. Yes. Your senators also have constituent services people, but they're serving the entire state. So you tend to get more personalized service from your state from your U.S. member of Congress, because there's several of those, many more of those for the state of Washington. And so just ask for constituent services and lay out your story. And typically what they'll do is they'll do a deep dive into the information and see what they can find out and get back to you. Now, Bernie used to offer to do that for anybody in the country, and people used to call his office all the time, and he even hired a couple additional constituent services people. I believe that Mark Pocan and Ro Khanna are willing to take calls from people all around the country, too. So you could, call that number, 202-224-3121, and ask for Congressman Ro Khanna or Congressman Mark Pocan's office, and ask them their advice, too. But that's where you go, David. And that's what you do, and I wish you the very best with it. Rose in Chicago. Hey, Rose, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. These Republican lawmakers in Washington helped to create these angry mobs by continuing to push Trump's lies, and they also helped to arm them via their anti-gun reform votes over the years. So I personally find it quite ironic that these same Trump-supporting Republicans are actually in fear for their and their families' lives because of these heavily armed mobs that they themselves created. It's just crazy.
Right, and that the mob came after Mike Pence. I mean, they were going to hang Mike Pence. They set up a gallows outside the Capitol building, and Donald Trump had given them. I think, it wasn't explicit, but I think it was fairly clear to all of them. It was clear to me, their marching orders. And Mike Pence has been one of their, most dutiful, loyal servants for years and years, promoting the idea that the Second Amendment is so that, you can have guns to protect yourself, and therefore you can have semi-automatic weapons and AR-15s and stuff. And Rose, it's exactly. A supreme irony.
It's almost like they should have been careful what they wished for. It's come back to haunt them. But thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Charles in Miami. Hey, Charles, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I've been listening to you all week. Oh, great. I've been listening to you all week, and I just had to wait till Friday because I've been watching Hypocrite TV all week, and my brains are scrambled. I even watch it at night, and I don't know what's wrong with me, but what they're doing over there on Fox Television is they're telling everyone that it's not their fault that the people, or not even Donald Trump's fault, that after his speech, his people went and ransacked the Capitol. They killed people. They killed a police officer, which they're supposed to be all Blue Lives Matter, and they don't want any type of accountability for it. They don't, as far as they're concerned, justice should not be done. And I'm just sick of it. Every day they're trying to say that Nancy Pelosi has this agenda where she's trying to get back at the president, and all it is that they don't want to face up to the fact that they killed a police officer and before the people died. It's on their hands, and they don't want to take responsibility for it. And now big tech.
I'm with you, Charles. Yeah, the media needs to own up to its role in this. Absolutely. Charles, brilliant. Thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I have a brief rant for you on the other side of the break, and then I'll be picking up more of your calls, so stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. This is from the prologue. It's titled The Hidden King. Nobody ever visits the stranded little community of Waldron, Arkansas. But even if they did, a tourist would never see the place for what it really is. Most outsiders would be fooled into thinking it was an actual small town. On any given morning, the residents awaken and begin their routine along Main Street. Old men park their pickup trucks by the curb in front of the Rock Cafe, which opens early for breakfast. As the cafe's booths and tables fill up, a congregation of old-timers in cowboy hats gathers in a loose ring of aluminum chairs out front, smoking and talking and stubbing out their cigarette butts in a bucket full of sand. Later in the morning, Chambers Bank in the south end of town opens up, and the tellers cheerfully greet customers by name. On Thursday at noon, the livestock auction opens in a cavernous barn on the north side of town, drawing crowds of ranchers who haul steel trailers behind their trucks, with cows staring out between the horizontal slats. In the late afternoon, teenagers park their cars by the gazebo south of the auction barn, proudly displaying their Mustangs and Broncos like big game trophies. These events have a rhythm of their own, the clockwork functioning of a small town economy. But it's all just window dressing. All of it would cease to exist in a moment and have no impact whatsoever on the true Waldron or its true economic reason for being. The real tempo of the town's economic pulse is measured by the coming and going of semi-trucks that roll down Main Street at periodic intervals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the middle of the night, tanker trucks full of animal feed rumble past the empty stores and out onto country roads that lead into the hilly terrain that surrounds town. At dawn, other trucks trundle in from the hills, heaped high with battered metal crates full of chickens that exude clouds of white feathers along the highway. The tempo can be measured in the regular arrival of train cars full of grain and oil seeds that dump their loads at a feed mill that clanks and hums and churns all night. And in the parade of refrigerated trucks that pull up to a slaughterhouse near the feed mill and get loaded with pallets of frozen meat. This is the real functioning of Waldron, Arkansas, and its true reason for being. This is the heartbeat of Tyson Foods, the nation's biggest meat company. The Tyson plant on the north end of Waldron is the only thing that keeps the town on the map. Appropriately, many residents simply refer to it as the complex. That's because the Tyson plant isn't just a factory, it's more like an entire small town economy consolidated into one property. The complex contains its own feed mill and hatchery, its own trucking line and slaughterhouse that covers several acres of land and processes about 1 million dead chickens a week. The complex is like an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses, an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses that used to define a small town like Waldron, the kinds of businesses that were once the economic pillars of rural America. Of course, tourists to Waldron would never see the Tyson plant, and not just because it sits on the north fringe of town away from Main Street. Visitors are stopped at its front gate and forbidden from exploring its grounds. So a tourist would have to be content to stroll along the sidewalks downtown, observing the fake Main Street, the deceptive array of little businesses that make it seem like a community. This illusory appearance cloaks Tyson's existence all the way from its roots in rural America to the grocery store shelves and restaurant menus where its products finally reach American consumers. The average shopper is usually fooled when he or she peruses the meat aisle, seeing what appears to be an abundance of choices and products. Tyson brand name wouldn't necessarily stand out with its logo gracing just a handful of products. But the rotisserie chicken slowly turning in its oven, the Bonisi brand pepperoni, the Lady Astor brand chicken cordon bleu, the frozen chicken pot pie, and the Wright brand bacon all come from the same company, Tyson. And then there is all the unlabeled meat that Tyson floods into the U.S. food system every day. The meat served in cafeterias, nursing homes, fast food restaurants, and suburban eateries where more and more Americans eat their meals. There's a very good chance any of the meat purchased in these places was made by Tyson. Even if Tyson did not produce a given piece of meat, the consumer is really only picking between different versions of the same commodified beef, chicken, and pork that is produced throughout a system that Tyson pioneered. Tyson's few competitors have resorted to imitating the company's business model just to survive. This book aims to explore the vast hidden territory between the remote farms and towns like Waldron, where Tyson raises millions of animals, and the final point of contact where consumers buy the company's meat. Unseen between these two poles is a hidden power structure that has quietly reshaped U.S. rural economies while gaining unprecedented control over the nation's meat supply. Just a handful of companies produce nearly all the meat consumed in the United States, and Tyson is the king among them. The company sits atop a powerful oligarchy of corporations that determines how animals are raised, how much farmers get paid, and how meat is processed, all while reaping massive profits and remaining almost entirely opaque to the consumer. Because Tyson and its imitators are based in the geographic and economic fringes of America in forgotten places like Waldron, the company has managed to escape the scrutiny it deserves. While Tyson's operations are remote, the company's business practices affect virtually everyone. About 95% of Americans eat chicken, which means they almost certainly eat chicken produced by Tyson. And then it goes on from there. The book is The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Industry by Christopher Leonard.
The Hidden History of Monopoly tells how Robert Bork, that guy from the Reagan era, transformed corporate America and destroyed the American dream. So we've had a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for the folks who support our program. It's about two people you probably never heard of, Isabel Cairo and Jay Sim. They are economists with the Federal Reserve. And they just came out with this extraordinary new paper. It was actually published by the Fed, in which they point out that most of the economic crises and problems that we're experiencing in the United States, going back to the 1980s, the stagnation in wages, the actual drop in wages, the stagnation in household income, as more and more people in households are working, the explosion in the net worth of the top 5% of households, things that are driving, credit bubbles and other, stock bubbles and things like this. A dramatic amount of that was the result of monopoly power, corporate monopoly power, and about half of that could have been eliminated if we simply taxed unearned income. It's amazing. Check it out at ThomHartmann.com. So, I promised you this little riff. I find this absolutely fascinating. This is, and it's science, but the science piece of it, I want to preface the science piece of it by talking a little bit about meta-science, metaphysics, or as it were. I've told you the story before of years ago when Louise and I were teenagers. There was a guy who was kind of a famous. He was a pseudo guru. He didn't have he didn't play guru, but he was a really good spiritual teacher actually. His name was Sufi Sam. He was based out of San Francisco, as I recall. And Sufi Sam had this theory about reincarnation. And what he said was basically, throughout our lives, we create this kind of Akashic record. We create this, the impact that we have on the world and the thoughts we have and the things we do and all this kind of stuff. And when we die, that all kind of goes into a giant goulash pot. And then when a new baby is born, the creator drops a ladle into that pot, which now has everybody who's ever died in it, right? And all of their thoughts and feelings and perspectives and actions and everything else, ladles out of that pot and pours a little bit of the goulash into this brand new soul that is being birthed. So as a consequence of that, we all have an obligation to lighten the soup. Right, to raise the vibrational energy or the goodness of the goulash, of all of us. And that was like one of Sufi Sam's main teachings, and Louise has just loved it for years. I think it's kind of cool too. Well, it turns out that there's a very similar thing going on with the internet.
And two steps to this. Number one, Elon Musk has been at the forefront now of living high-profile people who are warning us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence has tremendous benefits, but there could also be a downside. And what he is suggesting, and by the way, I said he's the most outspoken and famous living person doing this, because Stephen Hawking was carrying this banner before he died, the British scientist. And that is that if artificial intelligence reaches the point where it is educating itself, not people programming it to think a particular way, but actual intelligence. It's actually looking out onto the web and trying to understand what's going on in the world and what's real. And as a consequence of that understanding, this artificial intelligence system or machine then starts drawing conclusions. And Musk, this is Elon Musk. He says artificial intelligence is our biggest existential threat. He likens its development to summoning the demon. Now, this is not a Luddite rant. There's actually an upside to this at the end, and Musk actually supplies it. But Professor Stephen Hawking suggested that superintelligent machines could use humans as pets or for entertainment. He said it's a near certainty that a major technological disaster will threaten humanity in the next 1,000 to 10,000 years that could wipe out humanity. And so the question arises, well, if a machine was to, like I suggested before, if a giant supercomputer was given the ability to educate itself, well, what it has access to, of course, is the internet, and presumably every phone call that's happening all around the world, and all the smart speakers in people's homes, every conversation that's happening all around the world, and every Zoom call and every Skype call, if it could monitor all that stuff, what would happen? Well, we've had a glimpse of this. It was a few years ago. Remember Tay? Tay was Microsoft's intelligent Twitter bot. And it wasn't just designed for Twitter, but they tested it on Twitter. And what Tay did was, started out with a clean slate. It went on Twitter. It read all the tweets. And then it started tweeting from its own personality that had been created, that had been informed, that had been educated by all these tweets. And they had to shut it down after 16 hours because Tay turned into a white racist, a right-wing racist who was tweeting all this racist stuff because there was so much of it out there on the internet. And so, what happens if a giant AI computer that's networked with all the other intelligent computers in the country decides that, hey, the human race is a threat. It's a threat to the planet. We need to stop the human race. And suddenly power systems start turning off, water systems start turning off, traffic lights go away, communication systems are shut down. I mean, it's like we're almost to the point where an intelligent computer could take that huge step. So how do we avoid this? Well, this is where Elon Musk comes in. He says, and I quote, he says, if you're not concerned about artificial intelligence safety, you should be. It's vastly more risky than North Korea. And his solution, he said, nobody likes being regulated, but everything, cars, planes, food, drugs, everything that's a danger to the public is regulated. Artificial intelligence should be regulated too. And we all need to make sure that the stuff that we're adding to the soup, as it were, to the goulash on the internet, is enlightening and edifying and raising people's consciousness. So, end of rant. Back to Anything Goes Friday. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I was listening to Noël, and it kind of tied in what I wanted to call about. You have probably seen stuff on TV about Mo Brooks and his standing up and making speeches for Trump. Well, you may not have heard anything about an investigation into our Attorney General, Steve Marshall, that says that he has contributed to an organization that sent these people up there. Excuse me. And this is, we have a group now that wants Mo Brooks to resign. They also want all 6 of the Republican representatives who voted against impeaching Trump, who voted against the ballots, to also be forced to resign. But if you stop and you think back to when Don Siegelman was going to be governor, and we had Riley step in, everything goes back to that. Yes, all of this goes back to that, and the Republican takeover of the state of Alabama. I don't know how much of this is due to the fact that this is a Title X state, because I don't really understand Title X. But things go on here that, don't go anywhere else. And, we also have the problem with Tommy Tuberville, and the thought that next year Shelby is up for re-election. He'll be 87 in May. His birthday's close to yours. And next year he'll be 88. If he resigns or does not get reelected, that makes Tommy Tuberville our senior senator, which gives me chills, because I don't think that he can handle this job. And I don't know if Doug Jones will run again. I hope that he would. But to have all of this stuff come out of Alabama really bothers me. And, like when Noël was talking about energy, here Alabama Power also donates to all of these Republican representatives. Mel Brooks got $35,000, I think, out of the last donation to Republican people. And it goes down from there to the newest one, which represents me, took over Martha Roby's place. His name is Barry Moore. And I don't know anything about him, but being Republican and voting against impeaching and voting against the ballots, saying the election was false, bothers me. And, this stuff has got to stop, and there isn't any way to teach these people anything. I've been trying, for 10 years, and it doesn't, I'm not getting anywhere. People are avoiding me now and not speaking to me because obviously I was right and they don't want to admit it. But, but also, when it
so
comes
how do you
to
see this shaking out, Norma? And we have 45 seconds. Is Tommy Tuberville, or Tuberville, however you say it, is he really as dumb as he seems?
Unfortunately, in my opinion, yes. He was living in Florida, and they got him a resident up here and ran him as a Republican candidate, and he was elected because everybody punched Republican. But if he cannot even name the three branches of government, then he is not fit to be a senator. How can he even understand the work that needs to be done in the Senate House, the Senate floor? He can't understand it, then he does not need to be senator.
That's amazing. Well, here's hoping, Norma, that 2022 is going to be the year that Alabama wakes the hell up and does something right.
Well, we need to get somebody on the ballot by November of this year.
Yeah. Okay. So time to get cracking on the primaries. Norma, thank you. Thank you so much. It's always so nice to hear from you, and I'm glad you're still well. 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hi. The news media does a disservice to truth whenever it calls the QAnon lie a theory of any kind. It's not a theory. In fact, it's kind of comical that Republicans who do not believe in science actually took a term that is most closely related to science and called their QAnon conspiracy a theory. It's I looked it up. It's a lie stacked up on top of another lie, stacked up on top of another lie, making it a big lie. And it has no relationship to what real theory is all about. When people or scientists, when people or scientists come up with a new theory, what they do is they take known truths, known facts, and they stitch them together to come up with a new idea trying to explain how reality works. And what QAnon does, and what most Republican talking points or theories do, is they take lies And a good example of that would be Donald Trump's claim that he did more for blacks than any other president, except for maybe Lincoln.
Right.
Donald Trump disenfranchised blacks. He suppressed their vote. And what he's trying to do is get the accolades that Bill Clinton got when black people called him the first black president because he did so much for lowering their poverty. He's hoping that he can basically brainwash black people into calling him the third black president. He really wants that. And it would just be another...
He's not going to get it, Larry.
He's not going to get it.
Happen.
And even in this last election, normally when you do the polling after the election, exit polling, you ask people, who did you vote for? Well, in this last election, most black people voted for the president through the mail, so they didn't really have a good sample of exit polls. The black people that did go to the polls, those were conservatives. So when they do exit polling on those blacks, more of them voted for Trump.
So you're saying that the whatever the percentage was, I think I've seen different numbers, 8%, 12%. One person was saying 20%. I don't believe that of African Americans voted for Trump. You're saying that whatever that number is, if there's any kind of consensus around it, that number is nonsense because it wasn't a real exit poll. It was just some internet poll or a telephone poll.
There's no way to do an exit polling when on people who use the mail to vote. You can't do an exit poll.
That's why we don't have exit polls here in Oregon. You're right.
And so that's what happened. So they had black conservatives went to the polls because they're just as dumb as white conservatives, and they're denying that COVID is a threat. So they did the same thing that white conservatives did. They went to the polls at a disproportionate number, and that skewed the exit polls. But that's the only thing they have to try to claim that.
Do you think it's dumb, or do you think it's authoritarian personalities, Larry?
It is.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think that Trump's followers are not necessarily stupid, but they embrace the idea of authoritarianism, that you need a strong leader to hold a country together and all that kind of stuff, and that he's that guy for them. Anyhow, Larry, thank you for the call. Yep, good talking with you. Your points were really well made. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast, 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at thomhartmann.com, I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now. And this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. And welcome back. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And let's see here, Terry in Eugene, Oregon. Hey, Terry, what's on your mind today?
How are we doing, Tom? My question is why haven't we, or can the United States just declare like the Proud Boys and the other white supremacist groups enemies of the state or a terrorist organization, and then can they not then go after them and break them up and jail them for that, or is that illegal?
It's not legal. It's not illegal, but it's not legal. We don't have a domestic terrorism law in the books for good reason.
And because, I mean, look back at, J. Edgar Hoover followed Dr. Martin Luther King around for years, discovered he had had an affair, had a tape recording of it, called up King essentially and said, I'm going to send this tape to your wife unless you commit suicide. I mean, that actually happened, right? And that's what happens when the federal government, now he did that all illegally. He did not have the power to do that. But nonetheless, that's what happens when your government has the power to track people within the country. So instead of going after people for domestic terrorism, what you have to do is go after them for specific crimes that are already on the books, like interstate travel, which would be a federal crime if you cross state lines, to commit violence, or the actual commission of violence, or attempt. There actually is a law against insurrection. In fact, it's a 20-year penalty. So if you participate in a conspiracy, actually it's a conspiracy law as well, if you engage in a conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States, you face 20 years of prison. So there already are laws on the books that can deal with these guys, Terry, and I'd be very wary about giving the next Republican president, whether it's Tom Cotton or Josh Hawley, God forbid, or whoever, the power to decide that I might be a domestic terrorist and therefore they should come down on me. I think we need to stick to. In fact, the way that we treat even international terrorists has turned out to be a mistake. Giving the CIA carte blanche and saying you're welcome to torture people, you can kidnap people, you can render people to third countries, to Saudi Arabia, where they'll pull their fingernails out to get them to confess. That's all fine. And when we look back on Dick Cheney and George W. Bush doing that for 5 years, 6 years, we see that it damaged the United States. It didn't provide useful intelligence. It was very, very destructive. So just this whole idea that we can figure out who's a terrorist and therefore the rules are different, I think it's just a very dangerous thing that has proven not to be effective. Did I convince you, Terry?
You totally did, Tom. Thank you so much. And once again, you are an American hero. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate the call. George in Santee, California. Hey, George, what's up?
Yeah, happy Martin Luther King Day, Tom, and also today.
That's Monday. Thank you.
Pardon me?
That's Monday.
Oh, okay. Anyway, today is his actual birthday, and it's also my granddaughter's birthday, so happy birthday, Ava. But what I wanted to talk about was, it seems to me like we're in the middle of a coup attempt. Our media has been infiltrated with propaganda, and I think the success or failure of this coup attempt will depend a lot on our police forces, our security forces, and now our National Guard. What I'd like to know is how many of them actually think this election was stolen. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a good question. Trump has been promoting this big lie, and it ties in with the GOP big lie for the last 40 years that there is such a thing as voter fraud. And there is, for all practical purposes, no such thing as voter fraud. When George W. Bush spent $74 million in 2.5 years and had all 100 U.S. attorneys looking for it, he found 81 cases nationwide over a 10-year period. And almost all of them were people who had felony convictions who didn't realize that they couldn't vote in the state that they were living in. Earlier, when Loyola University did a study on about a 20-year period, 18-year period, they found 31 cases. So but see, the Republican Party, the reason why not one single Republican will say, as they kept begging Jim Jordan to say in those House hearings a couple days ago, not one Republican will say the election was not stolen. And they can't say that because the only way that the Republican Party has been able to hold power is by suppressing the vote of blacks, Hispanics, young people, and old people. And they're going to continue doing that with all their voter suppression techniques, particularly their voter ID and ramping it up and making it harder to vote by mail and all those kind of things. So that lie had a lot of support up until January 6th. You had pretty much every Republican in the country, both in the Senate and the House, supporting that lie. After that, after January 6th, you'll recall Mitt Romney came out and said, we need to tell the American people the truth. He's talking about his own Republican Party. He said, we need to say that this election was not stolen and Joe Biden won it fair and square. And that's pretty much almost verbatim what Mitt Romney said on the floor of the Senate. And not one of his colleagues would say that. Not one. Because they know that without the lie of voter fraud, they have no justification for the draconian hoops that they make people jump through in order to vote. So, but I think that it's starting to break down, George. Doesn't it seem that way to you?
Well, like I said, I would be interested to know how many of those National Guard troops and security forces and police force believe that the election was stolen. I don't personally know any policemen, but my daughter knows 2 policemen, that they both think that the election was stolen.
Yeah, and that's the tragedy, the big lie. It's like, Hitler's big lie was that Jews and communists forced the surrender of Germany in World War I, and therefore Germany had to be great and come back. It was a lie. This is a lie. This is a big lie too. And big lies can elevate dictators and lead to disasters. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Plexiderm, real science, real results. More info at plexiderm.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. And Superbeats, heart chews for heart healthy energy. More info at superbeatsradio.com/Tom.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding 2 forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested. Special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status. Fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive sum, but identity conflict is zero sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A report from the Justice Department's Office of Inspector General, the DHSOIG, just was released. NBC News grabbed a copy of it, and it's being reported on by Gabe Ortiz over at Daily Kos. He's all over this topic and has been for years, and he's absolutely brilliant in his reporting. And he points out that, well, here's how Gabe puts it in his own words. It's brilliant. He says, the final report confirms that Jeff Sessions, who was the head of the, who Trump put in charge of DHS, in particular, as an evil, grinning participant in carrying out this human and children's rights atrocity. We're talking about separating children from their families at the southern border when they're coming to this country seeking asylum from violence in places like Guatemala. When the U.S. attorneys expressed concern, Gabe writes, about the ages of children being taken from parents and that some parents were not being immediately reunited with their kids after being prosecuted and receiving time-served sentences, Sessions instead encouraged continued separations. We need to take away the children. This is from the notes from the meetings where Jeff Sessions was there. These are supposed to be quotes from Jeff Sessions, according to the Office of the Inspector General. Quote, Jeff Sessions, we need to take away the children. If they care about the kids, they shouldn't bring them in. We won't give amnesty to people with kids. And, it just goes on from there. He also points out that Kristen Nielsen, who was in charge of ICE and all this stuff, was gung-ho for this. And this is just mind-boggling. I hope that the House Oversight Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, and the Senate parallels to that do some serious examination of this, because the damage that has been done to the lives of these children will not be something that can be easily repaired. Being ripped away from your parents for years at a time, being told that you'll never see your parents again. There is no more severe trauma that any human being, outside of being physically slashed up or something or nearly dying, there's pretty much no other trauma that is as severe as that. And we just have to acknowledge the absolute horror, a horror worthy of just some really terrible countries around the world in the past that was perpetrated on these people by Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, with Ivanka saying, yeah, it's cool, and Jared going, yeah, I'll help out, and Melania wearing a jacket that said, I really don't care, that these people did to Hispanic people because of their race, largely. They were not separating the children of the people who are here illegally from Europe, and there's a lot of them. They were separating the children of people coming here from south of the border. And, we just cannot forget that. Paul in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's Anything Goes Friday. Paul, what's on your mind?
Oh, hi. I didn't quite I expect to be going through a...
let me just set this up real quickly, Paul, while you're gathering your thoughts. Joyce broke her wrist day before yesterday, and
Jeez, I'm sorry.
Had to go to the hospital yesterday. Yeah, so she can't screen calls today. So all I can do, so I'm doing it myself, and all I can do is anybody who's called in before, our system recognizes your caller ID, and so your name and your city and everything are already in here, and I can put you on the air. People who haven't called in before, I can't answer the phone for them. So,
I see.
You've called before, and I saw your name on the board, and so you're on the air.
Oh, well, thank you. You asked me to call in and let you know how it goes. I'm the guy that has acupuncturist that can cure Republicanitis, and I ran for state representative. And you allowed me to mention it on the air. And I got some donations from around the country. I have no idea who these people are. They sent me like $5.
That's great.
And so I really appreciate that. And I actually sent thank you notes to all 61 places that donated, and 2 of them came back. So Michael Garcia and Donald Murray, if you're listening, tell me your address so I can send you a thank you note. But you want to know how it went. So not unexpectedly, well, it was disappointing, but not unexpected. I lost 30. I got 37%. He got 63%. So pretty much 2/3, 1/3. But it's interesting, the statistics from the area. My particular county is Valencia County, and it's about a half hour south of Albuquerque, and it's rural with a couple of big towns, and it's very conservative. And there's 18,000 people registered in my district, and I got 5,000 approximately. I got 5,000 votes. He got almost 9,000 votes. So that was roughly the break. What's interesting is if you go look at the registrations, there's about 7,700 Democrats registered, 7,700 Republicans registered. So it's about the same. But there's a little over 4,000 people that have registered for neither major party. So that was going to be the deciding factor. What's also interesting is between January and November election, the Democrats registered about 200 people. The Republicans registered 700 people in that same time, and the neither was about 150 people.
So you need to be taking a lesson, Paul, if you're going to run again. You need to be taking a lesson from Stacey Abrams and get people registered and get people organized and get people.
Yeah, that's the problem, especially with COVID, because the party here made a decision not to go door to door because of COVID. So that was an additional problem,
which is understandable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to run again?
It is. I'm kind of thinking about, I don't want to run unopposed. I ran this time because they couldn't find anybody to run against them. So I said, what the hell, I'll do it. No big deal. Mm-hmm. And I spent about $5,000. He spent $28,000. He actually hired a full-time campaign manager for $5,000. This is how much I spent in the whole campaign. He got a $5,000 one lump donation from a big out-of-state oil company, too, which is kind of interesting. And out of my $5,000, about $3,000 was just to do one postcard mailing, was $3,000, and the rest was text messaging and stuff like that. So I'm thinking in 2 years, maybe, I'll probably do it again. If they can't find anybody else, I'm not going to run against another person that really wants to go after him. But if they can't find anybody, sure, I'll do it again. But
I mean, your first race is where you learn your lessons. I think Lincoln lost his first 2 or 3 elections before he finally figured out, how to get into the Illinois legislature and then the White House.
I don't know that this county is really winnable, so I'm thinking of doing absolutely nothing, and I've probably come up with the same thing. Because the Sunday before the election, on the Tuesday, the Democrats decided to get together and do a little parade, driving through the 2 big cities with, stuff taped to the cars and stuff like that. And so we put it out on Facebook. And all of a sudden, there was some chatter on the right-wing sites. And so when we all showed up, with about 40 cars, a couple of right-wingers showed up, started driving through the parking lot just, to harass us. So we called the cops. As soon as they showed up, they took off. So we had our little parade with about 50 cars. And then on my way home, I was driving fairly good-sized distance and went past in the opposite direction from the Trump parade they decided to do, maybe because we did, I don't know. I counted 217 cars in their parade versus 40 in ours.
Well, Facebook has been a great organizing tool for them, and
for everybody, really. So I think Trump was a big factor here. I had figured people were sick of Trump, and one of the things I made on my campaign was about Trump, and he's popular. He won by 10% in my county.
Wow, in your county. Paul, thank you. Thanks for the insight into a campaign, and when you run again, let us know, and I'll plug you again. Paul, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program on Anything Goes, Friday the 15th.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Eric in Erie, Pennsylvania. Hey, Eric, what's on your mind today?
Hey, afternoon, Tom. Listen, sorry to hear about Joyce's wrist, but I got to ask, how bad does the face of the Trump supporter look that she got the wrist on?
Oh, yeah, Joyce the Hammer.
Yeah. So,
I don't know how she broke her wrist, but maybe she punched somebody out in the supermarket who wasn't wearing a mask. I mean, who knows?
That's what I was going to say. Often the wrist bone is what gives when you give somebody one. So anyway, listen, I want to mention the matter that you've been drumming away on pretty good, over the last week or so, on what had been the procedural strategy in Trump's mind as they sat there and watched the events of January 6th unfold, that they were, going to have, Pelosi disappear and Pence, and it was going to fall to Grassley, and he was going to throw it to the House, and one vote per state, blah, 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 all that stuff. Isn't it amazing how they love the procedure of constitutional design when it suits their coup? But let's not forget they had to bulldoze a ton of constitutional procedure to get there. So in the sour grapes wake, they keep everyone claims the Constitution, and there's so many misinterpretations. I mean, just look at the social media thing. Oh, First Amendment. And all I can say to those people, are you kidding me? You're begging for socialist control of private companies, and you don't even realize it. So this use of the Constitution is a bludgeon by them. It really befits true patriots, and you really can't be a true American patriot without being semi-liberal, because our system of government just is set up that way. But you got to remind these people where they are betraying the Constitution, chapter and verse.
Yeah, amen. Very, very well said, Eric, and totally agree. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
I'm just thinking, you and I both grew up with the Jetsons, and it's pretty much showing that, as productivity goes with technology, our wages are supposed to go up and we do less work. And the perfect example is my uncle was a truck driver from the 40s, and he said, he was talking about before they had power steering. You didn't make less money once they got power steering. You made more. And it's just like when you're going to have driverless trucks. My suggestion is we bring all these guys back from Afghanistan and give them driverless, give them those electric trucks that Elon Musk is developing, low interest rates, and they could make money that way. We need a Green New Deal to start with something like that. If we could hit it with the veterans, I don't know. What do you think? You're still going to need people behind the wheel.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jeff, and I don't, the whole driverless truck thing, it gives me the creeps. To know that 30 tons of steel going down the road doesn't have a human being. Go ahead.
But you still have a human being behind it. Or at least why don't we just bring them back and give them one of those new, they have these electric semi trucks, I'm sure you've seen
Well, modern aircraft, modern jet planes are capable of flying themselves literally from takeoff to landing, and frequently do. But we still have two pilots in the cockpit. I don't see drivers going away. If that's what you're saying, I agree with you. Jeff, I got to run, but thanks for the call. It is an interesting topic. We'll be right back, coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, we have a new video up for the supporters of our program over at ThomHartmann.com. I really enjoy doing these separate from what we're doing on the air, because sometimes I can say things that would be impolitic or inappropriate to say on the air. Like the name of the website that I'm talking about in this video, and I lay it out and share it with you on the video. It's ratbleepingthecourts.com, and the bleeping, of course, is a word that you just can't say on the air that starts with F. And this website is just outing these judges that Donald Trump and the Federalist Society have been sending through Mitch McConnell's Senate like a friggin' assembly line, and how unqualified they are, how hateful they are, how aggressively they've worked to screw students, to deny. Well, one of them actually said that women who are on birth control pills, that should be reason to fire people. Right? It's just insane. You can check it out over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, picking up your calls, pretty much in the order that people called in. Mary in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind?
Yes, hi. I asked a Trump supporter the other day two things. Does he think the election is stolen, and was there something Mike Pence could have done about it? He said there were dueling electors in six swing states, and Mike Pence could have taken that into account and done something to swing the election in Trump's favor. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, there were not dueling electors. That happened in 1876. In that election, you had 4 states that sent 2 slates of electors to the federal government because you had 4 states that were basically split in their control. You had the Union Army occupying Louisiana, South Carolina, and Florida, I think were the states in the South. And then you had the Klan that was occupying Oregon at the time. And so there was actually 2 slates of electors that had been certified by the states. And Congress had to figure out which one to choose. In this case, all of the electors that were certified by the states actually showed Joe Biden won by 306 electoral votes. Trump was trying to say, and Trump's apologists were trying to say, that because they were suggesting that there was, quote, voter fraud, which is the Republican big lie, has been for the last 40 years. They were trying to say that because they thought there was voter fraud in some of these swing states, or because the swing states changed, as pretty much all states did in this election, changed their rules for the election, giving people more time to vote early or more time to mail in their ballots, things like that, because of the pandemic, that somehow affected the outcome of the election, and those states were in question, and their certified votes should not be counted. It was a BS argument then. It's a BS argument now. There were no dueling slates of electors, and Joe Biden won 306 electoral votes fair and square. There was no stolen election. And Republicans, like Mitt Romney said, need to start saying that out loud. So far as I can tell, the only Republican federally elected official who has been willing to say that is Mitt Romney.
All right. Yeah,
okay.
There's so many stories.
Yeah, no, this is part of the big lie. It's being promoted by Fox News, it's being promoted by OAN and right-wing hate radios all over it, and it's a lie, just pure and simple. Mary, thank you for the call. Patrick in Seaside, California. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Good. What's up?
Well, I had a question, but first of all, I want about something you read several months ago. But first of all, I haven't had cable for a while. Did I miss anything?
Yes. Yes, Methuselah. Or not Methuselah.
I still maintain my 4250 every month. I still maintain my 4250 every month for Free Speech TV. I basically didn't pay my cable bill because my girlfriend had some procedures she needs to have done because her blood work came back, her annual physical came back with some disturbing anomalies, and she wasn't able. She had to postpone her visits because of deductibles, and I didn't have the money to help pay her deductibles. So the only thing I could think of was to get her loaded up with some.
This is why we need Medicare for all, Patrick. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyhow, what's your topic? What are you calling about?
The only reason. Well, I wanted to ask you about something you read several months ago, but I was going to say the reason I didn't pay my cable bill was the only thing I could think of was to get her loaded up with cannabinoids and some cannabis products to just preemptively try and take care of this. My question was several months ago, you read, I think it was an email, and I think it was widely circulated by a woman who said that she lived among these people meaning white poor conservatives and middle class conservatives who are getting screwed by the Republicans, but they don't care. The only reason they vote for Republicans and they vote for Trump was out of hatred of liberals and trying to screw over liberals. And it was a pretty famous email. And I've been searching for it for months, and I can't find it. And I was wondering if you remembered it or what it was, where I could find it.
I do remember it. I don't have a copy handy. I don't know what happened. Usually, 9 times out of 10, after I use stories like that, we trash them or stick them in a box someplace. But I can tell you where I found it. I found it over at democraticulnderground.com. So what I would suggest you do, it costs absolutely nothing to join democraticunderground.com, just to create an account. You can post a question on their message board and just say, Tom read this thing on the air a few months ago. He said he got it from the DU. Does anybody remember what it is? Can you point me to it? There's also a search engine on their website that that might allow you to find it. And as I recall, it had links to other places where it had been published. But that's where I found it, Patrick. Does that help?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say, and I wanted to see what you thought about this. I mean, the Biden-Harris administration has to address a lot of issues, and in addition to helping all the other communities, including communities of color, I think what we really should consider doing is addressing, the Appalachian whites and the poor white people in different parts of the country who voted for Trump and vote Republican consistently.
Yeah. Well, that's what Biden is talking about doing.
Train people who are miners in West Virginia how to manufacture solar panels. Get them good jobs.
Yeah.
I think this is a good way to address the people and their grievances.
I'm with you. And if the Republicans, like I think Jim Justice is his name, the governor of West Virginia, if they really cared about their people, they would be doing that rather than promoting this
You're
Republican
listening
nonsense.
to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Thanks for the call, Patrick. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment, or right after this break here at the bottom of the hour. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Alan J. Lichtman, and it's titled Repeal the Second Amendment, The Case for a Safer America. This is from the introduction, titled The Book That Must Be Written. On April 28, 1996, 28-year-old Martin Bryant stopped at an inn near his home of Newtown in Tasmania, Australia, and shot to death its two owners. He then drove to the former penal colony and tourist attraction of Port Arthur, where he lunched at a cafe. After eating, Bryant pulled from his sports bag a semi-automatic rifle with a 30-round magazine that he had legally purchased through a newspaper ad. With no provocation, he began firing at patrons in the cafe and its gift shop. Before the police stopped his shooting spree, Bryant had murdered 35 and wounded 18 others. His motive remains unknown. There were people everywhere, bodies, said witness Lynn Beavis. I thought at the time, being a nurse, I've seen dead people, I've seen blood, I've seen things like this, but what I saw in there, nobody but perhaps a soldier would know what that was like. The leadership of a shocked nation responded to the Port Arthur massacre, not with thoughts and prayers, but with decisive action. The country's conservative-led government rebuffed their gun lobby and its American ally, the NRA, to adopt comprehensive national gun controls. In a 2015 broadside labeled Australia, There Will Be Blood, the NRA charged that those regulations, which Australia significantly tightened as of 2002, have, quote, robbed Australians of their right to self-defense and empowered criminals. If the NRA was right, America, with its lax control over firearms for alleged self-defense, should be one of the world's safest countries, certainly far safer than Australia, where criminals presumably evade gun controls to prey on defenseless, law-abiding citizens. Yet in the latest reporting year, gun homicides claimed 14,542 American lives, compared to 27 in Australia. And all homicides took 19,510 American lives, compared to 222 in Australia. Since the NRA issued its warning, firearm homicides have declined in Australia, while soaring by 3,534 in the U.S. An American is now over 30 times more likely per capita than an Australian to be murdered by a gun, and 7 times more likely to be murdered by any means. If we had rates comparable today to Australia's, some 14,000 American lives would have been saved from firearm homicides in 2017 alone. By the gun lobby's twisted logic, Japan, which has one of the world's strictest gun control laws, should be drenched in innocent blood. Yet out of a population of 127 million, shooters in Japan murdered only 3 persons and injured only 5 in firearm assaults throughout 2017. Australia and Japan are not outliers. As compared to residents of our closest peer democracies in the G7 group of nations plus Australia, an American in 2017 was over 20 times more likely to die from a gun homicide. The gun lobby would have you forget that gun deaths are not limited to murders. In 2017, 23,854 Americans died from gun suicides, 64% more than were killed in firearm homicides. As compared to the peer nations, the 2017 per capita rate of firearm suicides in the United States was 7 times higher, while the rate of suicides by other means was 40% lower. These other democracies all have strict firearm regulations. None has a constitutional right to keep or bear arms, a distinction the United States shares worldwide only with Guatemala, whose gun murder rate is the 3rd highest of some 195 nations worldwide. Why has America lagged behind the democratic world in protecting its citizens from needless death and injury? The culprit is not spending by the NRA on campaigns and lobbying, which other pressure groups exceeded. The real problem is that which gun control advocates fear to name: the Second Amendment. Led by the NRA, the gun lobby exploits a historically defective, perverse reinvention of this amendment to inspire their grassroots supporters, sell guns, and provide constitutional cover for their opposition to making us safer by regulating firearms. The competing movement for gun control has floundered in response to the gun lobby's triumphant marketing of the Second Amendment. Gun control advocates have righteous zeal and noble motives, but lack a winning strategy. Instead of forthrightly refuting the lobby's bogus claims, the gun control movement has instead fallen into the trap of lamely insisting, we support the Second Amendment, but we also support responsible gun control. With such a self-defeating strategy, the movement can never win. It plays on the gun lobby's home turf and fails to rally the American majority that favors stricter firearms regulations. It provokes only scorn from a gun lobby that dismisses yes but assurances as rank hypocrisy, and it ignores the clear history and the true meaning of the Second Amendment itself. The movement for gun control must strike hard with a new strategy. Repeal of the Second Amendment is not only right, but realistic. It would break open the political logjam and open a path for the comprehensive national gun control and safety measures that have eluded the American people for so long. None of these measures would confiscate firearms or stop Americans from using guns for hunting, sports shooting, antique collecting, or legitimate self-defense. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These form the Second Amendment. Book Repeal the Second Amendment by Alan J. Lichtman.
HartmannReport.com. It's free and there's no ads. HartmannReport.com. You know, we all know how a VPN protects your privacy. Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Basically, when I turned to get a summary of what's going on across the country, both MSNBC and CNN broke away for press conferences on the security measures that they're going to take in major cities in Washington. And I flipped over to Fox News, and what they were talking about is how Trump was the victim of what happened. Supporting those white nationalists that took over, they're the victims, and then they were complaining about the abuses of the Obama administration. Now, think about how ridiculous that is. The biggest terrorist organization on the planet right now is Fox News. The stuff every time they open their mouth, they're jeopardizing lives is what they're doing. It's scary stuff, you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them a terrorist organization, but I do agree that they have spread so much misinformation and so many lies, and they have backed up so many of Donald Trump's lies that they bear a lot of responsibility for what's going on, and
Rupert Murdoch, look at the control that man has over the media, not just in the U.S. but over much of the world. And that
in Australia and the
comment
UK
that comment you made about Sessions, I'll guarantee you, if you made that comment to a hard-nosed Republican Trump supporter, they'd say, well, all he did was prevent a bunch of future Mexican rapists. That's what they would say. That's the mentality that's going on in this country.
That's how racists talk, Tim. Yeah, I got it. And
absolutely,
there's a big chunk of racism. I mean, in fact, racism is the slow boil underneath this whole thing, underneath the Trump presidency, underneath the Republican Party, underneath the hey, we just elected the first black senator from Georgia, and that black senator from Georgia just gave control of the Senate to the Democrats. Oh my God! Let's blow the thing up. Let's take down the government.
It's funny you should say that, Tom, because the day before, on the 5th, when they were both won the runoff, I'll guarantee you by late afternoon, when they knew they were going to win, somebody called the Trump administration and the Republican hierarchy and told them to do whatever they needed to do the next day because they were going to get those two into office. Those are the conversations that are going on behind closed doors, because this whole thing with the amount of money that these Republican lunatics put into the system, you think they're going to do the kumbaya bipartisanship. They're going to try to make his life as miserable for Biden and Harris as they can the next 2 years, because what they want to do is take over the Senate and the House back in 2022. That's their prime prerequisite right now.
Of course. It's exactly what they did in when Barack Obama became president. And the big challenge I think that Joe Biden has right now is that Barack Obama was charismatic. He was a brilliant speaker. He was articulate. He communicated well. He was able to share a message in a way people got. And Joe Biden isn't. I mean, I think he's going to be a great president, and he's a good Democrat. But he's a stutterer. He has a hard time speaking, and when he does speak, he tends to yell, because I think that, or at least it sounds like he's yelling. And I'm guessing that that's a way that he's kind of pushing past his stuttering. God bless him. I think I'm all in with Joe Biden, but he's got to work probably 20 or 30% harder than somebody who has a natural gift for public speaking like Barack Obama. So it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one. Tim, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Mick in Seattle. Hey, Mick, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I'm glad that you're still vertical.
Yeah, me too.
I'm calling to give you big accolades for mentioning the children and the PTSD that they're suffering from being detained. There isn't a more important issue facing the Biden administration than global warming. The other fact is that them and regular children are suffering PTSD from the virus and the phobia. So the reason I called, though, is because I think we have a poster person who is perfect for the current situation, and I want to hear what you think. That would be Howard Hughes. Is he crazy today?
Well, he's dead. I don't understand.
I know that. That's true.
Point or your question.
Yeah, the point of it is it's all about timing. When he was alive, he was crazy. Now that he's passed, would he be viewed the same way?
Oh, yeah. I don't really know, Mick. I mean, he had obsessive compulsive disorder fairly severely. I've made the argument for years. In fact, it's a good chunk of one of the books that I wrote, that high-functioning people with obsessive compulsive disorder for whom the object of their obsession that triggers their compulsion is money end up as multimillionaires or billionaires, and they don't care who they have to squash to get there. And I think that's Howard Hughes, and then in his later years, of course, he just degenerated to the point where he was afraid to cut his fingernails or his toenails or his hair or anything else, and he just got weirder and weirder and weirder. But wasn't it Leo DiCaprio who played him in a movie? Am I remembering that right?
I'm not sure on that. I do think, though, that he would be a good person to portray him.
Yeah, I think he did. I could be wrong, but yeah, I'm with you, Mick. Thank you for the Sean says in my ear, yes, Leo DiCaprio did. Thanks a lot for the call, Mick. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois. Hey, Marty, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Hey, thanks for taking my call. Happy Friday. I just wanted to share my thoughts on the siege that took place on the Capitol building, and the unfortunate legacy that I think it's going to leave is just how weak of a country we looked in that moment, and just how, pathetic the whole siege looked, and the fact that credible news sources are saying that some Republicans may have even provided reconnaissance for some of those rioters that ended up storming the Capitol. I mean, it's just unconscionable to think, and how we looked in to other countries. I have friends that I chat with, in Latin America and other places, and they just can't believe that the U.S., people put a lot of hope in our country and a lot of hope in our democracy, and just to see it just so taken advantage of and just ripped apart so egregiously, it'll be a stain that I think we're not going to be able to live down for quite some time. Anyway, your thoughts?
Right. My thoughts, I agree. I think it shocked the world. It certainly shocked a lot of Americans, and as more and more of the story comes out, it gets more and more shocking. But the part that's not being amplified, and I think should be, is that the Trump administration refused to allow the National Guard to come. The Trump administration refused to allow the Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C., to send D.C. police in the way that she wanted to. The FBI had notified the Trump administration that violent protests were going to happen at the Capitol building. They ignored that notification. I think that Donald Trump denied protection to the Capitol building specifically because he wanted his violent mob to break into that building, kill Mike Pence, kill Nancy Pelosi, throw the electoral count to the House of Representatives, where his Republican buddies, and if you don't think this is possible, just look at the fact that, over and over and over again during that hearing, the 25th Amendment hearing on Tuesday, I think it was, various Democrats on that committee kept begging Jim Jordan, the minority leader of that committee, kept begging Jim Jordan to simply say the election was not stolen, and he refused to let those words come out of his mouth. The only Republican who has said that so far is Mitt Romney. They've got to hang on to their so-called voter fraud myth, or they lose everything. I mean, the whole Republican thing for the last 40 years would be revealed as a fraud. So I think that Trump was in on it, and I think that this was an actual plot to kill elected members of the United States government and install Donald Trump as the first American dictator. He would have been our Augustus Caesar, the guy who signals the end of the republic. And I think it's a terrible, terrible thing. But thanks for asking. Marty, nice to hear from you. George in Garden City, Kansas. Hey, George, what's up? We have a minute, George.
Yeah, Tom. Can you tell me what's behind the reasoning of Cuba being put or listed again as a terror-sponsoring nation?
It's another shout-out to right-wing Hispanics in Florida.
Okay. I just caught a little glimpse of it on the TV, and I didn't get it, and I thought, well, Tom will know.
Yeah, and it's also, they think that they're owning the libs or something. They're also, selling off lands to Native American lands. There's a sacred Native American land that the San Carlos Apache tribe has been using for years and years. Former Chief Nossi was interviewed about this, and they're selling off oil drilling rights. I mean, it's like, as they're leaving the house, they're stealing everything they can. That's what's going on. And in fact, there's even reports, I've seen reports in the media, that some of the people who work in the White House may be walking out of the White House with 100 and 200-year-old artifacts. Now, that's unsubstantiated right now, unconfirmed, but I'm willing to, we need to look into it. We need to look into it, because if so, that would be a disaster.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
But when you've got a grifter and a thief and a liar in the White House, anything can happen. And welcome back. Richard in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Richard, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call, as always. I wanted to go ahead and let you know that I've actually completely reconsidered my travel plans for Mr. Trump, because I had mentioned on previous call that he might be going to Russia, but that's not going to happen. After I thought it over, I realized that Vladimir Putin's much too smart for that. He'd much rather leave him here and create chaos, as well as try to go ahead and squeeze every detail of security and knowledge about the American system and underbelly that he can. He's not going to go to Russia. He'll never get to Russia.
You may be right. I mean, a lot's going to depend on what kind of imminent legal jeopardy he feels. But I've been saying for a year now, Donald Trump is a flight risk. It may not be Russia. There's other countries that he might want to go to. But on the other hand, if it turns out that there's not a bank in the world that'll loan him money, and he's going to have to start selling his properties at fire sales, the real estate agency that was selling his hotel in Washington, D.C. just dumped him. And he's trying to get $500 million for the hotel in D.C., and nobody's buying it. I mean, if it turns out that Donald Trump, a month or so from now is just flat broke and his family is flat broke outside of the money that they've grifted and stolen and stashed away in overseas bank accounts, there may not be any countries that want him. I mean, if he was a real billionaire, they might want him, but he's a phony billionaire. He's over $1 billion in debt. He's got a negative net worth, as far as I can tell. And so, go ahead.
Mar-a-Lago is going to be actually a prison for him is what's going to happen. He's not going to be able, he's going to declare it a national haven for himself, off limits, etc. And it's going to be actually a prison for him. He won't be able to go really anywhere.
And he's declared it his residency, by the way. So under Florida law, if he declares bankruptcy on absolutely everything, they can't take Mar-a-Lago away from him because that's his official residence. The citizens of Palm Beach, though, are saying, hey, wait a minute, we don't, you can't have a residence in a business. And
those
so, Trump, you've got to... Right. Yeah. They're really struggling. Anyway, I got to run. Richard, thank you for the call. James in Seattle. Hey, James, what's up?
Hi, I'm a little bit worried about Putin taking out an electrical grid, but I called about Republican nannyism. Their belief that if somebody gets $600 a week, then all they'll do is go to the beach and drink beer. Well, that's, it's like any lie that they use. It's like voter fraud. It doesn't exist. We're a herd animal, and in a herd society, status is the number one consideration of people. And so everybody, 100% of the people will tell you that they're the top 10%. So they're kind of delusional about their judgment about that. And that's exactly what the police say that they're so good at, is situational awareness of other people's performance of their personal responsibilities. And this is
it's the old saying, Republican voters are thinking that they are temporarily distressed billionaires. I mean, that's where it's at. James, thank you for the call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the True People's Media. Stick around. The hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment tells how the Second Amendment was written to protect Georgia's slave patrols. Did you know that 100 police officers, and the last year we have statistics for is 2017, so we'll use that. 100 police officers were killed by firearms during that year. Now, some were suicides, some were accidental shootings. A few of them were bad guys killing cops. 100. 1,000 of our soldiers all around the world were shot dead in 2017. 1,000. A little more dangerous, apparently, to be a soldier than to be a cop. But apparently, the most dangerous position in the United States is not being a police officer on the front lines. It's not being a soldier on the front lines of combat. It's being a child.
School-aged children killed by firearms in 2017, 2,462 of them. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com about this situation and what we can do about it. You can check it out there. And welcome back to Anything Goes Friday. And Ken in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Ken, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my phone call. First off, you're mispronouncing the party of the confidence men and con artists. It's Republican. They changed the A to an O about the time that Reagan ran for governor, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Also, thank you for having Mark Pocan on. He's carrying on the tradition, the Wisconsin tradition that Fighting Bob LaFollette was doing 100 years ago. Of course, Fighting Bob was a Republican. I want to know if you think that we will be expecting Nancy Pelosi to give a couple skunk eyes and a scornful finger waggle and then come across and say, we're going to put all of this behind us, reach across the aisle to our Republican members so we can get on doing the business of the people's business. Do you think she'll hold any of them accountable?
I really don't think she's going to do that. And you know, there was a tweet, in one tweet, this is, I saw this over on DU, but the tweet is from, well, I'm not sure, from Munson_Joe. Anyhow, it says, Pelosi said her young staffers knew to barricade the door, turn out the lights, and be silent because they learned it in school in active shooter drills. So, I mean, this is what, yeah, isn't that insane? I mean, this is what our culture of having, 400 million guns in a country of 300 million people, this is what it has come to. And it's just mind-boggling. Ken, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. It's great to hear, always great to hear from you. I appreciate it. Jeff in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Happy Friday, and get well soon wishes to Joyce. So, Tom, we only have a few more days to go till a 300-pound malignant tumor is removed from our body politic. And, as with most cancers, we're going to need radiation and chemo treatments that start with the impeachment and holding all those accountable in the failed coup attempt, but also investigations to all the other crimes of this worst presidency ever. But looking forward, Tom, our recovery process is going to be dependent on keeping the pressure on President Biden to implement an FDR-sized progressive agenda. And along with that, what do you think about, once again, mandating civics as part of any high school's curriculum, and including in that a history of African-American slavery and the genocide of Native Americans? Besides giving a factual education on the foundings of this country, we might just be able to instill a little more empathy and cut away at the racism at the heart of white America. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, well said. I'm totally down with the entire agenda, Jeff. And I mean, first we have to get our public schools funded again, and that's why Joe Biden's asking for billions of dollars in this first piece of legislation, to make that happen. But yeah, totally with you, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks a lot for the call. Carol in Menneson, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Good show. I believe this was an inside job. And the main reason I believe it is because the president was not taken to a bunker during the violent insurrection. Because if you recall, even during the protests in Lafayette Park, I believe it was in June, he was taken to a bunker that day. So I believe they knew that he was safe, and I think that's a very important piece of information that leans toward it being an inside job. Plus, I think he had help from Mo Brooks and Paul Kozar and a few others. And I think they should all be held accountable, every single one of them. They should have the book thrown at them all.
Yeah, I don't think after this severe a trauma, Nancy Pelosi is going to let these guys get away with it. Carol, thank you for the call. Arnie in Palm Springs. Hey, Arnie, you're on the air. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Happy New Year. I have been getting text messages and emails from an organization called Act Blue, which I've been donating to. And one of the things that they keep saying that they will have my donations matched 350 to 400%. And I'm questioning that now. I mean, they never say who their donors are or if that's really true. Do you have any information about that?
To the best of my knowledge, Arnie, Act Blue is basically a bank. It's a process. They process donations for Democratic politicians, and they don't ask for money themselves, and they don't mail out things themselves. So you may be getting emails from somebody who's pretending to be Act Blue, or somebody who is trying to commit some kind of fraud on you or perpetrate a fraud on you. But I would be very surprised, particularly if they're just blindly asking for donations. There are a couple of Democratic groups out there that particularly during or democratically aligned groups out there that particularly during the Warnock-Ossoff campaign were saying that they were raising money for Ossoff and Warnock, and were. But they were also funding their own infrastructure and their own staff and things like that. I thought it was better just to give directly to the campaigns. But, anyway, you have to figure out who you want to support. Thanks so much for being with us today. Hey, special thanks to Louise Hartman, Sean Taylor, Nate Atwell, Jamie Holly, Joyce the Hammer Nance with a hurt wrist, Nigel Peacock, Susan Ethergott, Patrick Hoyt, Geraldine Halbert, Ron Hartenbaum, Chase Spross, Nicholas Miller, Pat Sweeney, Jabbermocky, and Jay LeBlanc. Thank you all for helping make this program work. And thank you for being with us this week. We'll be back on Monday, same time, same place. In the meantime, have a great weekend and get out there, get active, tag your hit. See you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Plexiderm, real science, real results. More info at plexiderm.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More information at expressvpn.com/Tom. Gabby takes the pain out of insurance shopping. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. And Superbeats, heart chews for heart healthy energy. More info at superbeatsradio.com/Tom.
and the middle class grew.